So picture this. The Galactic Wildlife Preservation Council, in all their infinite wisdom, had what they called an impossible assignment. And by impossible, I mean the kind of job that makes seasoned professionals suddenly remember they have urgent dentist appointments on the other side of the galaxy. They needed someone to handle Ganesh. That's right, Nash, because apparently when you're a terrifying apex predator from a death world, you get a name that sounds like what happens to your bones when you meet one. Enter Captain Rex Hawkins. That's me, by the way, former elite space ranger, current professional disappointment, and the Council's absolute last choice for anything requiring competence. My record spoke for itself, which is probably why nobody wanted to listen to it anymore. Hawkins, said Council Director Florm, his tentacles writhing with barely concealed disgust. We have a special assignment for you. Special, right. In my experience, special assignments were like special meals at cheap restaurants. They sounded fancy, until you realized what you were actually getting. Florm's translator box crackled as he continued. The creature designation Ganesh requires a handler. Previous attempts have been unsuccessful. Now there's a euphemism that could win awards. I'd heard the rumors. 3 Altarian Beastmasters, 2 Rigelian animal psychics, and 1 very optimistic Andromedan, who believed in the power of interpretive dance. All of them now enjoying extended stays in various medical facilities, assuming they still had enough limbs left to enjoy anything. And you think I'm the man for the job? I asked. Already knowing the answer would be both hilarious and deeply insulting. We think, Florm said, pausing to let his translator catch up with his particular brand of alien sarcasm, that you are expendable. Well, at least they were honest. Points for honesty, minus several thousand points for tact. Nash is a Keplerian apex predator, Florm continued, consulting his datapad like he was reading my obituary. 12 feet tall, 16 tentacle appendages, acid saliva, and a documented intelligence level that borders on strategic thinking. It has killed every handler we've assigned. Killed or maimed? I asked, because apparently I still had some optimism left to crush. Both, sometimes simultaneously. Outstanding, absolutely outstanding. The assignment was simple in that special way that simple things often turn out to be impossibly complicated. Transport to Research Station Kepler, located in the thrilling vacation destination known as the Outer Rim. Attempt to establish a working relationship with Ganesh. Try not to die in a way that would require too much paperwork. When do I leave? I asked, because clearly my survival instincts had gone on permanent vacation. Immediately, Florm said, and I swear his translator box added a little chuckle. Your transport is waiting in Bay 7. As I walked toward what was probably my doom, I couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Rex Hawkins, the guy who once accidentally started a war with a sentient forest because he forgot to ask before picking fruit, was now being trusted with the galaxy's most dangerous predator. This was either going to be the shortest assignment in Council history, or the most interesting way anyone had ever died in the line of duty. Spoiler alert, it was neither. Research Station. Kepler looked exactly like what you'd expect from a facility designed to house things that could kill you in creative ways. Industrial gray walls, reinforced everything, and the kind of lighting that made everyone look like they were already dead. Charming. Dr. Marcus Pemberton met me at the airlock, and I could tell immediately that this guy had seen some things. His lab coat was pristine, but his hands shook like he'd been mainlining caffeine for a week straight. His hair looked like he'd been experimenting with electrical sockets. Captain Hawkins, he said, extending a trembling hand. I'm the xenobiologist assigned to this project. I have to say, I'm not entirely convinced this is a good idea. Join the club, I replied. We meet for drinks every night and discuss our poor life choices. So where's our tentacled friend? Pemberton's face went 3 shades paler, which I hadn't thought was physically possible. Containment level 7, maximum security. We've reinforced the barriers twice since the last incident. Handler number 3. Ganesh figured out how to use the containment field generators as projectiles. Right, because regular dismemberment wasn't creative enough. The elevator ride down to level 7 was the kind of uncomfortable silence you get when everyone knows somebody's about to die, but nobody wants to be rude enough to mention it. Pemberton kept fidgeting with his datapad, occasionally glancing at me like he was trying to memorize what I looked like with all my limbs attached. Has anyone tried just talking to it? I asked, because apparently I was still capable of asking stupid questions. Talking to it. Pemberton looked confused. It's a predator, Captain. Its idea of conversation involves teeth and digestive acids. The containment chamber was impressive. I'll give them that. Force fields, reinforced transparent aluminum, and enough warning signs to wallpaper a small moon. And behind all that security was Ganesh. Holy mother of space whales. 12 feet tall was accurate. but somehow didn't capture the sheer presence of the thing. Imagine an octopus that decided bodybuilding was its calling, then gave it armor plating and anger management issues. 16 tentacles moved in patterns that were almost hypnotic, each one thick as my torso, and ending in what I can only describe as biological can openers. Its eyes though, its eyes were the real problem. They weren't the dead, predatory stare you'd expect. They were intelligent, calculating, like it was solving a very complex puzzle, and I was one of the pieces. Beautiful, isn't it? Pemberton whispered, the way people whisper in cemeteries. That's one word for it, I said. I can think of several others. Ganesh turned toward us, all 16 tentacles suddenly still. For a moment, we just stared at each other through the barrier. Then it did something that made my blood freeze. It waved, not the aggressive gesture of a predator marking territory. A casual, almost friendly wave. Like it was greeting an old buddy. Did it just? Pemberton started. Yeah, it did. That's when things got interesting. Because apparently, my brilliant response to being greeted by a 12-foot killing machine was to wave back. Ganesh tilted its head, a motion that should have been impossible given its anatomy, and made a sound. Not a roar or a screech. More like purring. If purring could somehow convey amusement and mild approval. This is highly irregular, Pemberton muttered, frantically taking notes. Previous handlers were immediately met with aggressive displays. Ganesh would slam against the barriers, secrete acid, make threatening gestures. Maybe it's having a good day, I suggested. That's when Ganesh did something that changed everything. It reached one tentacle toward a control panel inside its containment area, moved with impossible precision, and started tapping out a pattern. Tap tap, pause, tap tap, pause, tap tap. Is that? Pemberton's voice cracked. Is that Morse code? I listened for a moment, translating in my head. HELLO. Pemberton dropped his datapad. That's impossible. We never taught it human communication protocols. It shouldn't even know what Morse code is. But Ganesh wasn't done. It continued tapping. YOUSEEMNICE. And that's when I realized that everything the council had told me about this assignment was probably wrong. Very, very wrong. The next 3 weeks developed into the most bizarre routine of my career. And considering I once had to teach table manners to a species that absorbed nutrients through their feet, that's saying something. Every morning at 0800 hours, I'd arrive at containment level 7 with what had become our standard greeting ritual. Nesh would tap out "Good morning Rex" in Morse code, and I'd respond with "Good morning Nesh, how's the prisoner life treating you?" Yes, we'd developed actual conversations. Through tapping, because apparently my life had become an interspecies telegraph comedy. Dr. Pemberton had gone from nervous wreck to completely fascinated wreck, spending hours documenting every interaction. His notes probably read like the fever dreams of someone who'd been hit in the head with a xenobiology textbook. This is unprecedented, he'd mutter while scribbling frantically. Nesh displays problem-solving abilities that exceed most council species. Yesterday it rearranged the furniture in its containment area to spell out mathematical equations. What kind of equations? I'd asked. Calculus, advanced calculus. It was solving for the optimal trajectory to escape through the ventilation system. Outstanding. My new best friend was a mathematical genius with escape plans. The really weird part was how much I was starting to enjoy these sessions. Nesh had a sense of humor, believe it or not. When Pemberton accidentally dropped his lunch tray one day, Nesh tapped out butterfingers and made that purring sound that I'd learned meant it was amused. But it was during week 2 that I started getting flashbacks to why I was really here. My glorious past failures kept creeping back, especially the incident that got me demoted from the diplomatic corps. Picture this: first contact with the Verdanian collective, a species of sentient trees that communicated through chemical signals released by their fruit. Beautiful, peaceful beings who'd achieved interstellar travel through biological engineering. The Council's golden opportunity to establish trade relations with a completely unique civilization. And what did Rex Hawkins do? I got hungry during the 6-hour welcoming ceremony, and grabbed what I thought was a snack from a nearby branch. Turned out to be the Verdanian equivalent of shouting an obscenity at their queen mother. The fruit I ate had been programmed with a chemical message that roughly translated to: your roots are shallow and your bark is diseased. You photosynthesis challenged weakling. 3 Verdanian warships and one very awkward apology later, I was reassigned to less sensitive duties. Which apparently meant everything from traffic control in asteroid belts to my current gig as monster babysitter. You seem distracted today. Nesh tapped out during our afternoon session. I'd gotten good enough at reading its tentacle Morse to follow along in real time. Just thinking about past mistakes. We all have those. Mine involved being born on a planet that corporations wanted to strip mine. That was new. Naish had never mentioned its home planet before. Strip mine. Kepler 442b, rich in rare minerals. My species were classified as dangerous wildlife to justify relocation. Funny how that works. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Relocation to where? Research facilities. Like this one. For the good of galactic commerce. Before I could process that bombshell, Commander Vex arrived for his weekly inspection. Vex was a Centaurian, which meant he looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a used car salesman, and then given the result delusions of grandeur. Hawkins. Vex clicked, his translator rendering his voice with the warm charm of a rusty food processor. I trust you're making progress with the specimen. Specimen, not creature, not being, not even monster. Specimen. We're getting along just fine, I said carefully. Excellent. The Council is very interested in your methods. Previous handlers attempted to dominate the creature through force. Your approach of accommodation is yielding fascinating data. Something in the way he said fascinating data made my skin crawl. What kind of data? I asked. Vex's compound eyes glittered with what I was learning to recognize as corporate greed. Behavioral patterns. Intelligence assessments. Weakness analysis. All very valuable for future handling protocols. Behind the barrier, Naish had gone completely still. All 16 tentacles frozen in place. Future handling protocols. I repeated. Oh yes. Naish is just the first, you see. There are dozens more of its species in various facilities across the sector. Your success here will determine how we process the rest. Process. Like they were talking about manufacturing widgets instead of living beings. That's when I started to understand what was really happening. And why I was really here. Dr. Pemberton was looking increasingly uncomfortable, fidgeting with his datapad like he wanted to throw it across the room. His moral crisis was written all over his face in bold underlined letters. As Vex left, clicking smugly about quarterly reports and efficiency metrics. Naish tapped out a single word: understood. Yeah, I was starting to understand too. And I was really not liking what I was figuring out. It was Dr. Pemberton who finally cracked. 3 days after Vex's inspection, I found him in his lab at 0300 hours, staring at a bottle of Rigelian whiskey like it held the answers to the universe. His hands weren't shaking anymore, which somehow made him look even more disturbed. Can't sleep either? I asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. Sleep, he laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. Right, like I could sleep knowing what I know. Care to share with the class? Pemberton took a long pull from the bottle, then pushed a datapad across the desk to me. Corporate communications. Accidentally copied to the research division, instead of the administrative one. You know how bureaucracy works. One wrong routing code and suddenly you see things you weren't supposed to see. I picked up the pad, already knowing I wasn't going to like what I found. The header read Kepler Mining Consortium. Phase 3 implementation. The first document was clinical, in that special way that made mass murder sound like a quarterly business review. Species relocation initiative proceeding ahead of schedule. Keplerian apex predators successfully reclassified as dangerous wildlife. Preservation Council authorization obtained for containment and study. Keep reading, Pemberton said grimly. The next section was titled Behavioral Modification Protocols, and that's where things got really ugly. Handler assignments designed to establish baseline aggression patterns. Expendable personnel selected for initial contact phases to minimize loss of valuable assets. Expendable personnel, that would be me. Previous handlers instructed to provoke aggressive responses through standard dominance techniques. Specimen reactions documented for future pacification strategies. I felt something cold spreading through my chest. They wanted those handlers to die. Gets better, Pemberton said, not meaning it was better at all. The final document was the real nightmare. Phase 4 implementation. Upon completion of behavioral analysis, remaining specimens to be processed for biological weapons development. Acid secretions, neural toxins and muscular strength to be harvested for military applications. I set the pad down carefully, mostly because I was afraid I might throw it across the room otherwise. They're going to kill all of them. After they figure out how to weaponize them. Yeah. Pemberton's voice was flat. Nash and its entire species are just raw materials for the next generation of galactic warfare. The whole preservation angle is a smokescreen. And I'm here because someone needed to prove that Keplerian predators could be controlled through non-violent means. Make them seem less dangerous so the military applications look more feasible. You weren't supposed to survive this assignment, Rex. None of the handlers were. But you. He gestured helplessly. You went and made friends with it. The pieces were falling into place now, and the picture they made was uglier than a Blowbacksian family reunion. My assignment wasn't about animal handling or xenobiology research. It was about proving that Nash's species could be controlled, studied, and ultimately destroyed. There's more, Pemberton continued, pulling up another file. The Kepler Mining Consortium isn't just after the minerals. They want the planet for military testing. Turn the whole world into a weapons development facility. What about the other specimens you mentioned? 17 facilities across the sector, each one holding between 5 and 12 Keplerian predators, all of them scheduled for processing once the behavioral studies are complete. I thought about Nash, tapping out mathematical equations and asking about my day, about its sense of humor and obvious intelligence, about how it had said we all have past mistakes, and its mistake was being born on a planet that corporations wanted. How long do we have? Vex filed his preliminary report yesterday. Phase 4 authorization is expected within the week. That's when the moral crisis hit me like a freight hauler carrying irony. Here I was, Rex Hawkins, professional screw-up and diplomatic disaster, suddenly faced with a choice that actually mattered. Save one alien predator and probably doom my career forever, or let an entire species get turned into biological weapons because it was easier. We need to tell Nash, I said. Pemberton looked at me like I'd suggested we juggle plasma grenades. Tell it what, exactly? That it's scheduled for vivisection next week. It has a right to know. And besides, I stood up, already planning what felt like the stupidest idea of my career. Maybe it has some ideas about what to do. Rex, you can't be serious. Even if we wanted to help, what could we possibly do? This is a galactic conspiracy involving mining consortiums, military contractors, and the council itself. I don't know yet. But I've got a feeling Nash might surprise us. The walk to containment level 7 felt longer than usual. My head was spinning with corporate communications, classified documents, and the growing realization that I was about to commit what was probably treason on 17 different worlds. Nash was waiting when I arrived, as if it had sensed something was wrong. All 16 tentacles were moving in slow, agitated patterns. You look troubled. It tapped out as soon as I was in range. We need to talk, I said. And you're not going to like what I have to tell you. About the Kepler Mining Consortium. I stopped cold. You know, I have excellent hearing. Also, Commander Vex is not as quiet as he thinks when he makes his reports. Of course. Why hadn't I thought of that? Nash had been listening to everything. So you know about Phase 4, about what they're planning. I know about my people in the other facilities. I know about the weapons development. I know that you were never supposed to survive this assignment. And Nash's tentacles went completely still for a moment. Then it tapped out something that made my blood freeze and my heart race at the same time. I have been waiting for someone I could trust to help me stop them. Dr. Pemberton was right about one thing. I was about to do something incredibly stupid. But for the first time in years, it felt like the right kind of stupid. Planning a jailbreak with a 12-foot tentacled genius turned out to be surprisingly straightforward. The hard part was convincing Dr. Pemberton that we weren't all going to die horribly in the next 20 minutes. This is insane, Pemberton whispered as we stood outside the containment area at 0200 hours. Even if we get Ganesh out, where exactly do we go? This is a space station in the middle of nowhere. One problem at a time, I said, inputting my access codes into the containment system. First we spring our friend, then we figure out how to save 17 facilities worth of his relatives. I've already solved that part. Ganesh tapped out as the barriers came down. Though you may not like the solution. The moment the force fields disappeared, Ganesh moved with fluid grace that was absolutely terrifying and oddly beautiful at the same time. 16 tentacles coordinated like they were part of some cosmic ballet, and suddenly I was looking at my first unrestrained Keplerian apex predator. Okay, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What's the plan? Instead of answering, Ganesh reached into what I'd assumed was decorative armor plating and pulled out something that made my brain hiccup. A data storage device. Military grade. By the look of it. Where did you get that? I asked, forgetting to speak out loud. I made it. From components in my containment area. Medical sensors, lighting circuits, food dispenser electronics. Pemberton's jaw dropped. That's impossible. Those systems aren't compatible. The power requirements alone. Ganesh made that purring sound again. You assume too much about my species' capabilities. The data device projected a holographic display that made my head spin. Schematics of the research station, communication arrays, and what looked like enough corporate financial records to bury half the galaxy in lawsuits. I have been monitoring all communications for 3 months, Ganesh explained. Every corporate memo, every military order, every financial transaction related to the Kepler project. You've been spying on them this whole time. I prefer the term intelligence gathering. And I have some very interesting intelligence. The hologram shifted, showing communication logs between Commander Vex and someone identified only as Consortium Director Prime. The specimens are responding better than expected to the new handling protocols. Vex's recorded voice played back. Handler Hawkins has established unprecedented cooperative behavior. We should be able to accelerate Phase 4 implementation. Excellent, came the reply in a voice that sounded like gravel mixed with corporate ambition. The military applications alone will generate profits beyond our initial projections. How soon can we begin harvesting? Harvesting. They were talking about sentient beings like they were crops. However, Vex continued, I recommend immediate termination of Handler Hawkins once we have sufficient data. His methods are effective, but his psychological profile suggests potential security risks. Agreed. No witnesses to the preliminary phases. Well, that settled any lingering doubts about my job security. There is more. Ganesh continued, manipulating the hologram. The consortium has been selling preliminary biological samples to multiple military contractors. Samples taken from my people without consent. The next set of files made my stomach turn. Medical records showing tissue harvesting, genetic analysis, and something called tactical application testing that I really didn't want to think about too hard. This is genocide, Pemberton whispered. They're not just planning to kill them, they're already using them for experiments. That's when the alarms started blaring. Security breach detected. Containment level 7. All personnel to emergency stations. So much for stealth, I muttered. Ganesh's tentacles moved in what I was learning to recognize as the equivalent of a shrug. Stealth was never the plan. Follow me. What happened next defied everything I thought I knew about physics, biology, and the fundamental nature of reality. Ganesh didn't just move through the station corridors. It flowed. 16 tentacles working in perfect coordination, each one finding purchase on walls, ceiling, support beams, and occasionally confused security personnel. It was like watching liquid mercury with intelligence and a really bad attitude toward authority. Security teams were scrambling to respond, but they'd trained for containing a creature in a box, not dealing with one that could simultaneously hack their computer systems, disable their weapons, and redecorate their faces. Ganesh moved through them like they were annoying furniture, careful not to seriously hurt anyone but making it very clear that resistance was futile. How are you keeping up? Ganesh tapped out on the wall as we ran, because apparently it could multitask casual conversation while conducting a one-creature revolution. Stubbornness and poor life choices, I panted back. We reached the station's communications center just as Commander Vex was trying to send an emergency transmission to the consortium. Ganesh's entrance was, to put it mildly, dramatic. 16 tentacles burst through the doorway simultaneously, followed by the rest of its considerable bulk. Vex took one look at his escaped specimen, and did what any reasonable corporate middle manager would do. He screamed and tried to hide behind his desk. Commander, I said, catching my breath, we need to talk. This is impossible. Vex clicked frantically. Security protocols were specifically designed to contain that creature. Yeah, about that, I said, watching Nash casually disable the communication console with surgical precision. Turns out your security protocols were designed by people who fundamentally misunderstood what they were dealing with. What do you mean? Ganesh extended one tentacle toward Vex, stopping just short of his trembling compound eyes. Then it did something that changed everything. It spoke, not in Morse code, not in taps, but in actual, audible galactic standard. I mean, Ganesh said in a voice like rolling thunder mixed with silk, that you never bothered to ask what we actually are. The translator box on Vex's desk started smoking. Apparently, hearing a mindless predator speak perfect, galactic standard was more than its circuits could handle. That's impossible, Vex stammered. You're classified as non-sentient wildlife. We are classified, Ganesh said with infinite patience, as whatever classification serves your economic interests. But classification and reality are often very different things. Dr. Pemberton was frantically taking notes, his scientific mind apparently overriding his survival instincts. The vocal apparatus, the linguistic processing, the cultural implications. This changes everything we know about Keplerian biology. No, Ganesh corrected gently. This changes everything you assumed about Keplerian biology. We have always been exactly what we are. That's when the real revelation hit me. You're not just predators, are you? We are guardians, Ganesh said. Kepler 442b is not just our home. It is a preserve, a sanctuary for dozens of species that exist nowhere else in the galaxy. We have protected it for over 3,000 years. Protected it from what? Ganesh's tentacles moved in what I'd learned was the equivalent of a bitter smile. From exactly what is happening now. From those who see only resources to be extracted and life to be exploited. Commander Vex was making small choking sounds, probably realizing that his career was about to become very complicated. The consortium thinks they are strip mining a world inhabited by dangerous animals, Ganesh continued. In reality, they are destroying a biosphere that represents millions of years of evolution and 3 millennia of active conservation. And your people are not just guardians. We are the historians, the scientists, the keepers of biological diversity for an entire sector of space. Each facility where my people are imprisoned holds not just individuals, but entire libraries of genetic knowledge, environmental data, and conservation techniques. The scope of what the consortium was destroying was staggering. Not just genocide, but the elimination of an entire civilization dedicated to preserving life. We have to stop this, I said. We will stop this, Ganesh corrected, switching back to tapping because apparently old habits die hard. But first we need to contact the other facilities. How? The communication system is destroyed. Ganesh made that purring sound that meant it was amused by my ignorance. Ganesh had said anything about using their communication system. What happened next made me question everything I thought I knew about the universe. Ganesh extended all 16 tentacles, touching various points around the communication center, and suddenly the entire station began to hum with a frequency I could feel in my bones. Biological quantum entanglement communication, Pemberton whispered in awe. They don't need technology to communicate across interstellar distances. The response came immediately. A harmonic resonance that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. As 17 facilities across the sector suddenly became aware that one of their own was free, and very angry about what had been done to them. Commander Vex, meanwhile, had progressed from choking sounds to full-blown panic. This is a disaster. The consortium will never authorize the resources to contain a coordinated uprising. The insurance claims alone will bankrupt 3-star systems. Good, I said. Maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to turn an entire species into weapons. That's when the station's main computer system lit up like a festival day, displaying transmission after transmission as the truth about the Kepler project began broadcasting to every major news network, government body, and civil rights organization in the galaxy. Ganesh had been busy during those 3 months of captivity. Very busy.
3 weeks later I was sitting in the most surreal job interview of my career. The Galactic Council chambers looked exactly the same as they had when they'd assigned me what they thought was a death sentence. The only difference was that now I had a 12-foot tentacled partner who'd become something of a celebrity. So, Director Florm said, his tentacles writhing with barely concealed embarrassment, it appears we may have made some errors in our initial assessment of the situation. Errors. Right. Like accidentally classifying an entire species of environmental scientists as mindless predators was just an oopsie in the paperwork. The Kepler Mining Consortium has been dissolved, Florm continued, consulting his datapad like it contained his resignation letter. All assets frozen, all personnel under investigation. The 17 facilities have been shut down, and all Keplerian guardians have been returned to their homeworld. With full diplomatic immunity and reparations, Nash added in that voice like rolling thunder that still made half the council members flinch. Yes, of course. Full diplomatic status, very generous reparations package. Anything else would be unthinkable. Unthinkable now that the entire galaxy had watched 3 weeks of news coverage about the conspiracy. Funny how corporate genocide becomes unthinkable right around the time it becomes bad publicity. The Council would like to offer you both positions in our new Interspecies Relations Division, Florm said hopefully. Full reinstatement of rank premium benefits package, your own ship sounds nice, I said to Gnash. It does, but I believe we have other plans. That was the understatement of the century. During the past 3 weeks, while lawyers and journalists had been tearing the consortium apart like hungry Rigelian scavengers, Nash and I had been fielding job offers from every corner of the galaxy. Turns out, when you accidentally expose a massive conspiracy and help liberate an entire species of wrongfully imprisoned environmental scientists, people start to think you might be good at solving problems. We appreciate the offer, I said to Florm, but we've decided to go freelance. Freelance, private investigation and problem solving, specializing in cases involving corporate malfeasance, interspecies disputes, and situations that require unconventional approaches. What I didn't mention was that we already had more cases than we could handle. Missing persons investigations from 3 different star systems. A diplomatic crisis involving sentient crystals who were being sold as jewelry. And something very suspicious happening in the Outer Rim involving a corporation that seemed eerily similar to the late unlamented Kepler Mining Consortium. I see, Florm said, probably calculating how much trouble 2 loose cannons with a proven track record of exposing inconvenient truths could cause. And you're sure we can't interest you in a more structured working relationship? Structure is overrated, Nash said. We prefer the flexibility to follow our conscience. Dr. Pemberton meanwhile had parlayed his documentation of the whole affair into a full research position with the Keplerian Guardians. Last I heard, he was learning biological quantum communication and publishing papers that were revolutionizing xenobiology. His hands had stopped shaking, which was probably a good sign. As for Commander Vex, well, let's just say that explaining to your corporate overlords why your top-secret genocide project ended up as the lead story on Galactic News Network is not great for career advancement. He was currently enjoying extended accommodations at a minimum security prison facility, where I hoped he was learning valuable lessons about treating sentient beings with respect. There is one thing, I said, as we prepared to leave the council chambers. Yes. Next time you have an impossible assignment involving dangerous alien predators, maybe try asking them what they want instead of assuming they want to eat you. Florm's tentacles went very still. That seems reasonable. Revolutionary. Even, Nash added, with what I'd learned was his version of sarcasm. We left the council chambers and headed for our new ship, the diplomatic incident, which Nash had insisted on naming. It seemed appropriate, given our track record. So, I said, as we settled into the pilot seats, where to next? Nash pulled up a holographic display showing our current case files. Missing Andromedan scientists, suspicious mining operations, and what appeared to be a slavery ring operating under the guise of an entertainment corporation. The universe is full of problems that need solving, Nash said. And apparently, we are very good at solving them. Yeah, well, I said, firing up the engines. Turns out the real predators in this galaxy walk upright and carry briefcases. As we headed into hyperspace toward our next adventure, I couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Rex Hawkins, professional screw-up and diplomatic disaster, had finally found his calling. And it involved being partnered with a 12-foot tentacled genius who could hack computer systems with his bare appendages and communicate across interstellar distances through biological quantum entanglement. The Galactic Council had been right about one thing. It really had been an impossible assignment. They just hadn't realized that impossible was exactly what the universe needed.